I let my Instagram-obsessed wife miss her favorite artist on her birthday to teach her a lesson about being late. Was I wrong? My wife Sarah 32 and I, Tom 31, have been together for 5 years, and I've reached my breaking point with her chronic lateness. It's not just annoying anymore, it's become a constant source of tension in our relationship, grating on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. To give you some context, Sarah and I met at a mutual friend's wedding. She was the wedding photographer's assistant, and I was immediately drawn to her creative energy and the way she could capture moments through her lens. Back then, her photography was just a hobby, something she did for the pure joy of it. We hit it off instantly, bonding over our shared love of music festivals and indie bands. Our courtship was a whirlwind of concert dates, impromptu road trips, and late-night conversations about our dreams and aspirations. The first year of our relationship was blissful. Sarah had a regular job as a graphic designer, and her Instagram account was just a casual outlet for her photography. She'd post the occasional sunset picture or a artsy shot of her morning coffee, nothing too serious. But things started to change when one of her posts went viral. It was a simple photo of a local cafe's latte art, but somehow it caught the attention of a popular food blogger who shared it with their followers. Overnight, Sarah's follower count jumped from a few hundred to several thousand. That taste of social media fame was intoxicating for her. I watched as my spontaneous, carefree girlfriend transformed into someone obsessed with curating the perfect online presence. Every outing became an opportunity for content creation. Our favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurant was no longer just a place to enjoy good food, it became a backdrop for her Instagram stories. Even our weekend hikes, which used to be about enjoying nature, turned into lengthy photo sessions with Sarah trying to capture the perfect candid shot of herself gazing thoughtfully into the distance. At first, I played along. I'd patiently hold the camera, suggesting angles and helping her achieve the look she wanted. But as her following grew, so did the time we spent on these impromptu photo shoots. What used to take a few minutes now stretched into hours. Our friends started making jokes about it, calling me Instagram husband and asking if Sarah had approved their outfits for group photos. The lateness issue crept up gradually. In the beginning, it was just a few minutes here and there. She'd spend an extra 10 minutes getting ready, ensuring her outfit was Instagram worthy. Then it became 20 minutes, then 30. I started telling her events started earlier than they actually did, just to make sure we'd arrive on time. It became a complex mental calculation. If we needed to be somewhere by 7 p.m., I'd tell her 6:15, knowing she'd need at least 45 minutes more than she thought to get ready. One particularly memorable incident occurred at my cousin Amy's wedding last year. I'd told Sarah we needed to leave by 4 p.m. for the 5 p.m. ceremony, hoping to account for her usual delays. But that day, she decided to do a full get ready with me video for her followers. By 4:30, she was still setting up lighting for the perfect final look shot. I was pacing in our living room, watching the minutes tick by, my anxiety mounting with each passing moment. We finally arrived at the venue at 5:20 p.m., missing the entire ceremony. My family was understandably upset, and I was mortified. Sarah, however, seemed more concerned about the lighting in the reception hall and whether it would affect her photos. That night, as we lay in bed, I tried to have a serious conversation about her tardiness and its impact on our lives. She brushed it off, showing me the engagement on her wedding guest outfit post and telling me how many new followers she'd gained. Things only escalated from there. Last month, we had tickets to a comedy show with our friends Mark and Lisa. I'd used my usual strategy of telling Sarah the show started 45 minutes earlier than it actually did. Even so, we ended up being 20 minutes late because she insisted on taking photos of her outfit in 3 different locations in our apartment. Mark and Lisa were clearly annoyed, having saved seats for us only to have to deal with the disruption of our late arrival. The comedian even called us out, making us part of his act as we awkwardly shuffled to our seats. Just last week, we had reservations at a new restaurant that Sarah had been dying to try, mainly because it was known for its Instagram-worthy interior design. I told her our reservation was for 7 p.m. when it was actually for 7:45 p.m. Despite this buffer, we still managed to be late because she spent over an hour setting up a pre-dinner photo shoot in our kitchen. By the time we arrived at 8 p.m., the restaurant had given away our table, and we ended up eating lukewarm takeout on our couch while Sarah edited her photos. That was when I decided enough was enough. I sat her down and told her explicitly that I was done managing her time for her. I explained how mentally exhausting it was to constantly strategize and plan around her inability to be punctual. I told her I wouldn't be giving her fake early times anymore and that I expected her to act like an adult and manage her own schedule. Sarah seemed to take the conversation seriously at the moment. She nodded along, even tearing up a bit when I explained how her behavior affected me and our relationships with others. She promised to do better, to be more mindful of time. But actions speak louder than words, and her actions were about to be put to the test. Her birthday was coming up, and I had planned something special. I'd managed to get tickets to an exclusive music event featuring several performers, including her favorite artist, indie darling Luna March, who was scheduled to perform in the first act. This was a big deal. Luna rarely performed live, and Sarah had been following her career since her early YouTube days. The tickets weren't cheap, but I knew how much it would mean to Sarah to see her idol perform live. The event was scheduled to start at 8 p.m. on Saturday. Following through on what I'd told her, I didn't give her any buffer time. I simply told her when we needed to leave and hoped she'd remember our conversation and plan accordingly. Saturday came, and I watched with a mixture of frustration and resignation as Sarah went through her usual pre-event routine. She spent the morning staging our bedroom for her Instagram stories, setting up a ring light and tripod, and trying on multiple outfits. Each outfit change was accompanied by a full photo shoot, complete with different poses and facial expressions. She was in her element, chattering excitedly about hashtags and engagement rates, seemingly oblivious to the passing time. By 7:30 p.m., when we should have been leaving, she was still touching up her makeup and taking selfies in different locations around our apartment. I could have said something, reminded her of the time, rushed her along as I'd done countless times before. But I didn't. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions, to understand what her behavior truly cost. We finally left at 8:15 p.m., arriving at the venue just before 9 p.m. As we walked in, we could hear the final notes of Luna March's set fading away. Sarah's face fell as she realized what had happened. She turned to me, her eyes welling up with tears, and asked how I could do this to her on her birthday. She accused me of enjoying her disappointment, of putting my ego ahead of her happiness. I simply reminded her of our conversation, pointing out that I'd been clear about no longer managing her time for her. She countered that the whole point of the event was to see Luna March perform, and now that opportunity was gone. Throughout the rest of the event, she alternated between crying and giving me the cold shoulder, barely paying attention to the other performers. The ride home was tense and silent. Sarah spent the entire journey scrolling through social media, looking at posts from people who had arrived on time and caught Luna's performance. Each swipe of her thumb felt like an accusation, the silence between us growing heavier by the minute. When we got home, she disappeared into the bathroom while I settled on the couch, trying to decompress from the evening. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from her, "Don't bother coming to bed tonight. You're not welcome." I sat there for a moment, staring at the message. After everything, she still didn't get it. She was still acting like a child, trying to punish me for her own mistakes. I decided I'd had enough of the games. I waited until I heard her moving around in the bedroom, presumably changing for bed, before heading upstairs. When I walked in, the look she gave me could have frozen hell over. Before she could say anything, I calmly told her that her saying I wasn't welcome was irrelevant because it was my bedroom too. If she was uncomfortable, she was welcome to take the couch. For a moment, she just stood there, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. Then, without a word, she grabbed her phone and her overnight bag and stormed out. A few minutes later, I heard her car start up in the driveway. She was probably heading to her mother's house, as she always did when we had a significant fight. Linda, my mother-in-law, has always been Sarah's enabler. She's the one who first encouraged Sarah's social media aspirations, constantly praising her eye for aesthetics and suggesting she could make a career out of it. When Sarah started being late to family events because of her pre-event photo shoots, Linda would just smile indulgently and say, "Artists need time to create." I'm sure right now, Sarah is sitting in Linda's kitchen, being consoled and told how insensitive I am for not understanding her creative process. The thing is, I do understand creativity. I work in advertising, after all. I know the importance of visual content and building a brand. What I don't understand is why it has to come at the expense of basic courtesy and respect for other people's time. As I lay in our bed alone that night, I couldn't help but think about how we got here. When did likes and followers become more important than real-life experiences? When did my wife's Instagram feed become more valuable than our actual relationship? The next morning, I woke up to several missed calls from Linda and a string of texts from Sarah's sister, Emma, telling me how cruel I was for ruining Sarah's birthday. Emma, who had always been the more practical of the two sisters, usually stayed out of our disagreements. The fact that she was involved now suggested that Sarah had painted quite a picture of my supposed wrongdoing. I spent Sunday alone, using the time to catch up on work and actually enjoy some peace and quiet without having to pose for photos or wait around while Sarah got the perfect shot of her morning coffee. Around midday, I received a text from our friend Mark, asking if everything was okay. Apparently, Sarah had posted a cryptic Instagram story about toxic relationships and people who don't support your dreams. I didn't bother responding. By Monday morning, Sarah still hadn't come home. I went to work as usual, trying to focus on my projects rather than the drama unfolding in my personal life. During my lunch break, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. Sarah had posted a series of photos from her self-care Sunday at her mom's house, face masks, bubble baths, and her mother's homemade comfort food, all accompanied by vague captions about healing and knowing your worth. It was Tuesday evening when she finally came home. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard her key in the lock. She walked in, looking somehow both defiant and uncertain, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I've been thinking," she finally said, setting down her bag. "Maybe we need to see someone. Like a counselor." I couldn't help but notice she was filming this conversation for her Instagram stories, her phone held at what she probably thought was a discreet angle. This was exactly the problem. Every moment of our lives had become content for her followers. "I think what we need," I replied, turning off the stove, "is for you to decide what's more important, your social media presence or our actual life together." She flinched slightly at my words, but quickly composed herself. "That's not fair," she protested. "My social media is part of our life. It's my career, my passion. Why can't you support that?" "I have supported it," I pointed out. "For years, I've been your photographer, your timekeeper, your audience. But it's taken over everything, Sarah. We can't even go to dinner without it turning into a photo shoot. We're constantly late to everything because you're more concerned about documenting the moment than actually living it." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. For the first time in a long time, she actually seemed to be listening. "Look," I continued, "I'm not asking you to give up Instagram entirely. I'm just asking for balance. For consideration. For you to be present in our actual life, not just the carefully curated version you show your followers." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, absently fiddling with her phone. Finally, she set it down on the counter, face down. I noticed. "I miss Luna March," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I've followed her for years, and I miss seeing her live because I was too busy taking photos of myself getting ready to see her." It wasn't quite an epiphany, but it was a start. That night, as we lay in bed, Sarah turned to me and asked, "Do you really think I'm that bad with time?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Sarah, for our second date, you were so late that I almost left. The only reason I stayed was because you texted me a photo of yourself stuck in traffic, and I could see our favorite band's poster in the background of the car behind you. I figured anyone who liked them couldn't be all bad." She smiled at the memory. "That was before I had more than 100 followers." "Yeah," I agreed. "Back when you took photos because you enjoyed it, not because you were trying to build a brand." She was quiet for a moment. "I do still enjoy it, you know. Maybe just not as much as I used to." The next morning, I woke up to find Sarah already dressed and ready for work, a minor miracle in itself. She'd made coffee and was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone as usual, but something was different. Instead of taking her usual morning selfie with her coffee cup, she was actually drinking from it. "I've been thinking," she said as I poured myself a cup. "Maybe we could try something. Like, one photo-free day a week? Just to start?" It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a step in the right direction. "I'd like that," I said, sitting down across from her. She nodded, then picked up her phone again. "Just let me post about this new chapter in our relationship." I couldn't help but roll my eyes, but I let it go. Rome wasn't built in a day, and Instagram influencers don't change overnight. As I sit here writing this, I'm still not sure if I was an asshole for letting Sarah miss her favorite artist. Maybe I could have handled it differently, found a gentler way to make my point. But sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their actions. Sarah and I are still working on finding the right balance. She's trying to be more mindful of time, and I'm trying to be more patient with her creative process. We've had a few setbacks. Last week, we were late to dinner with friends because she insisted on getting the perfect shot of the sunset from our balcony. But we're making progress, one unfiltered moment at a time. Yesterday, we went for a walk in the park near our house. Sarah brought her phone, of course, but it stayed in her pocket for most of the time. As we were leaving, she paused to take a photo of a particularly beautiful flower. Just one photo, not an entire photo shoot. And you know what? It was a really good picture. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, Sarah turned to me and said, "You know, I've been thinking about what you said, about living the moment versus documenting it. And I realized something. Some of my favorite memories are the ones I don't have photos of. Like our first kiss, or the time we got caught in that thunderstorm at the outdoor concert. I nodded, remembering how we'd huddled under a tiny umbrella, laughing as the rain soaked through our clothes. Those make for better stories than photos anyway, I said. She smiled, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. For a moment, I thought she was going to try to stage a bedtime photo, but instead, she just set her alarm for the morning. Maybe tomorrow we could try making some memories instead of content? It's a start. And maybe, just maybe, we're finally on the same page, or at least, in the same photo frame.